board. Okay.
What table are we going to use?
Okay. Okay. I think we're going to get started. We're going to be reading a little bit of text.
What page are we on?
451, 451, paragraph 24. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Happy birthday.
Sure. Okay. We're going to read some of the text. The percentage of Rav Aviner and other stuff will be far greater than the amount of text today. So we're going to start with paragraph 24. Kaftal. Amar Kuzari. The king said, Ani rotzeata shetar'e li me'at mishirei hachachamot hativ'iyot asher amarta shayu etzlechem. He said, look, okay, we've had a long discussion, very long discussion, which started off with the names of God. It diverted, it went on different journeys. We talked about the difference between Christianity and Islam on the one hand and Judaism on the other. He said, okay, now we're going to talk about the topic of nature. Now, the truth is that we've talked about nature already in, I believe it was the second essay. We talked at length about it. But the perspective here is going to be different. Because what he's really asking, and what the Rav is going to talk about through Sefer Yetzira, is not just tell me about nature, but rather what is Hashem's involvement in nature? What are these chukim, or the various, what we call the laws of nature, but much, much greater, much deeper than that. And the Rav chooses this book called Sefer Yetzira to be the jumping off point of the discussion. And it's actually a very, very long section. It takes up most of the rest of the fourth essay. And we'll get through what we can over the next many weeks. And what becomes to the point of being unintelligible for some of us, meaning me, we're going to skip. Because if you take a look online, you even take a look at some of the book and just kind of flip through it, you'll see all kinds of interesting charts. Okay. So let's read paragraph, not the whole thing, but the first few lines of paragraph Kaf Hey, number 25. I'm going to read that. We're going to look at the first sentence of Sefer Yetzira, and then we're going to start listening to Rav Aviner. Okay, so let's take a look at Kaf Hey. We're on page 451, unless it's gone to the next page. Paragraph 25. Amar Chaver, the Rav said, Mehem Sefer Yetzira. From among them, meaning from the books that I referred to many, many chapters ago, a couple of essays ago, we will discuss the topic of what's called Sefer Yetzira. Now, he didn't choose a boring book. He didn't choose a simple, plain book. He chose one of the earliest, what we call Kabbalistic works. The topic of the book is creation. Simple. God created the heaven and the earth. What else you want to know? Well, we're going to want to know a lot. I think I've talked about this in here, maybe in this class, about, that one of my passions in life that's not Torah related is time travel. And I've always played this game with my students in school, asking where they would go back to if they could and why. And I've always had the same answer, I think, since I'm a kid, which is I want to go back to the 6 days of creation. I want to see, first of all, it's probably 6 million years long. But that's a different story. But I'd like to really watch what happened. Anyways, so he says, V'hula Avraham Avinu. So the Rabbi Yehuda Levi makes a categorical statement that the book was written by Avraham Avinu. So there's dispute about that. And we're going to see when we listen to Rav Aviner, there's a little dispute whether Avraham Avinu wrote it or it was given to him by Malach, an angel, and then was passed along. V'hu amok uferusho aroch. It's deep and its explanation is very wide. So just for your information, if you were to look online, and you could go to many websites to see this, that the Chida, Chaim Yosef David Azulai, and the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, are the two more common. There was one more forgot who, most common commentaries written about on Sefer Yetzira. One of the copies I looked at online had the introduction from the Chida was, I think, 50 pages long. That was the introduction. So you can imagine the depth of this book. Let me read the whole sentence and I'll give a general translation. מתרבים מצד, אבל הם מתאחדים נסמכים מצד אחרת, הסכמתם מצד האחד אשר יסדרם. He says, בגדול, what this book really deals with is divinity, with the concept of the oneness of God, and with the topic of what seems to be on the one hand, or there's like a paradox. On the one hand, things that look, my words, more or less, not his exact words, random on the one side and very organized on the other. So you might think, again, he doesn't say this right now. Actually, what I just translated, he said, what I'm about to say, he didn't yet say. And that you might look at nature or the world and see this random things. Like, why is it that turtle was crossing my backyard 2 days ago? We didn't have it. Let's stop, right? That's random. And on the other hand, there's also, we see very organized. For example, I can tell you 6 months and 3 days from today, I can tell you exactly what time sunrise and sunset is going to be in Abu Dhabi, if you wanted to know. Because it's going to be the exact same time it was a year before that, and a year before that, and a year before that. There's consistency and constancy in nature. So what I'm going to do is I want to take a look at just the opening sentence of Sefer Yetzira, and then we're going to look at some commentary from Rav Aviner, because we need this as an introduction. I don't know about you, but when I went to school, I found there were two, besides the way teachers taught and the relationship to the class, there were two kinds of teachers broken down very generally. Those who wanted to just get through material, and those who wanted you to understand the material. Those who wanted you to understand the material generally gave you an introduction. And what bothers me in education, and I've said this before, is if you ask the average person, and I do this with every student I have, whether it's Navi or especially Gemara, did they ever tell you what it is and why you learn it? 9 times out of 10, my students will say no. And I say, you sure you just didn't misunderstand? They says, no, we just were told, here's the Gemara we start to learn. They gave us the explanation of the words and how you learn it, but where's it come from? And I'm a big, big believer in giving background and introductions to understand what we're talking about. I could just tell you, look, the Sefer Yetzira is this book. It's very deep, and we're going to start reading but that doesn't do you any good. So let's take a look at the first slide that has the first sentence. So welcome to the book of Sefer Yetzira. Move you all over here. Okay, ready to go. Mishpat Harishon b'Sefer Yetzira. This is the first sentence. Bishloshim u'shtayim netivot kliot. With 32 paths, amazing, wondrous paths of chokhmah, of wisdom, chakak ya Hashem tzvakot Elokei Yisrael Elokim Chayim. God carved out, I'm using that word a little liberally right now, God of the hosts, Hashem, the living God, Umelech Olam, Kel Shakai, Rachum V'Chanun, Ram V'Nisa, Shochenad V'Kadosh, Shemo Marom V'Kadosh, all these appellations given to God. Ubara et Olamo, he created his world, which doesn't mean earth, it means the entire universe. Bishlosha Sfarim, with the use of 3 meanings of Samach Pe Resh. Bisfar, V'Sefer, V'Sipur. Now you'll notice, even if you never officially learned Hebrew language, other than just to learn it in like on the street, that all 3 words have the exact shoresh, Samach Pe Resh. Sfar, which is the old Hebrew word for mispar or sifra, which means number or numeral. Sefer, which literally means book, and sipur, which means story. So when you start off a book that you know is going to be very Kabbalistic and very deep, with that kind of a statement, you obviously understand that when he uses these 3 words, sefar, sefer, and sipur, that they don't mean what we understand them to mean. Numbers, a book, and a story. It has to have a different meaning. So, first of all, just as an aside, there's a piyut I say every morning called Bishloshim Mishtaim Netivot Shvilach. That Hashem created the world with 32 paths. Just as an aside, and even if you don't understand what I'm talking about, I'm just going to mention it. The 32 paths, what that refers to is the 22 letters of the alphabet and the 10 sefirot. The 10 sefirot, the 10 emanations of God, which one day we will talk a little bit about here as we go through Sefer Yetzira. For those of you who, when you count Sfirat HaOmer, afterwards you say, it's the Hod Shebahod, Hod Shebanetzach, Netzach Shebahod, all that, that's the 10, part of the 10 Sfirot. But that's like saying the planet Mars is a big rock. I mean, it's a lot more than that. Okay, so now what exactly are we going, what is he talking about? We don't know yet. Okay, so just the main thing I want you, that's why I put it in red and bold, because this is where we're really going to be spending some time early on, is this sefer, and sipur. Let's take a look at the next slide. I'm going to take a look and understand now. This is now going to be Rav Aviner's introduction to this next section of the book. Lefanenu, is this big enough for you to see, or you need me to make it bigger? You just give me a thumbs up. Okay. So, Lefanenu arichut dvarim rabba b'sefer ha'osek b'inyanenu. Before us lays a very long dissertation about a book that deals with our topic. Who's Sefer Yetzira? Sefer Yetzira miyuchas la'Avraham Avinu. The book Sefer Yetzira is attributed to Avraham. V'sudar sofit al-yedei Rabbi Akiva. And it was, let's just say, edited and come into its final state by Rabbi Akiva. Umechil chamisha parakim ktsarim. It contains 5 short chapters. The truth is, there's evidently there's different, from what I've seen, the different versions, because there's some that they're not short. You know, one he'll say here is it's just 1,000 words, and I found copies that have hundreds and hundreds of pages. So I'm not exactly sure why. I haven't found the answer yet. First of all, he tells us this isn't the only book that Avraham wrote. In the beginning of the halachot of Avodah Zarah of the Rambam, it says, Yeshno ti'ur toldot ha'emunah Yisraelit. It gives us a description of the history of Jewish faith. Ketzad hofi Avraham Avinu, amudo shel olam. How Avraham Avinu burst onto the scene, how he appeared. He's like the foundation of the world. V'shiber hatzlamim. He broke the idols. He went. He was a traveling salesman, so to speak. Chas v'shalom to say it like that. But he went from city to city, from country to country. V'karei sham b'shem Hashem el olam. And he called out the name of God. Like, hey, enough with your idols. Enough of this polytheism of serving many gods. There's only one God. I actually quoted this a few weeks ago. You may remember, but in a different context. To the point where he, and we know Sarah, of course, converted between thousands and tens of thousands of people. And he implanted in their hearts this great principle, meaning the concept of one God. So the Rambam, he's quoting, the Rav Aviner is quoting the Rambam to show that he, Avraham, wrote many books. And he also made all this knowledge not known to his son Yitzchak. Kach lashon Rambam. B'masechet Avodah Zarah nizkar shekibalnu b'masorot sheb'masechet Avodah Zarah shel Avraham Avinu hayu 400 prakim. Now, whatever this means, I'm just going to translate it, but it's a little esoteric. It says that in the version of the Gemara of Avodah Zarah that Avraham had, there were 400 chapters. Okay. He didn't have a Gemara like we know it, because the Gemara was only written after the time of the Mishnah, which is from the year 200 to the year 500 was the Gemara. So we're talking 3,000 years before that. And the Gemara says that evidently we only have left one book, which is Sefer Yetzira. Everything Avram wrote was books that had to do with against Avodah Zarah, Philosophia shel emunah b'Hashem, and philosophy about faith in God, amitnaset me'al avodah zarah, which lorded over any form of potential avodah zarah. From a person who worshipped idols, there's a very specific perspective on this world. Lemala min hachumranut. Hu mevin sheyesh mashu lemala min hametziut hagashmit hafizi. He understands that there is something out there that's above the existence that we see here, this physical world. Yeshnam kochot rabim azormim biyakum. There are various, many powerful powers, or many powers that flow out there in existence in the universe. Chol koachu elil, and every power, they believe, is an idol. Lo ved avodah zarah. Now, an idol doesn't mean necessarily just something you bow down to. It means that which should be worshipped. Lo ved avodah zarah, to an idol worshiper, yesh histaklut ruchanit al haolam hachomri. They actually have a spiritual outlook on the physical world. Hu eino etist. He's not an atheist. Chomrani shitchi. Sometimes we forget. We think that a person who was an oved avodah zarah is like, besides being a whack job, of course, because thinking that they could have power, but we don't necessarily think of them in terms of spirituality. But they are spiritual people because they feel that these kochot, these powers, could have an influence in this world. Avram Avinu poneh el haoved avodah zarah. Avram Avinu turned to the worshiper of idols. Umatzia lo histaklut ruchanit al hametziut mitoch Hashem echad u'shmo echad. He said, Avram Avinu, though, approached the Ovdei Avodah Zarah to look at the mitziut, the existence, the presence of this world, from the perspective of Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad, Zeh Sefer Yetzira. Says, this is the book of Sefer Yetzira. Kmo ken, yeshno sifra d'Adam kadma, shekatav Adam harishon. There's also a book called the Book of the First Man, that's the Aramaic translation into English, which was written by Adam harishon. The sefer d'Tzniuta, and the sefer d'Tzniut written by Yaakov, that doesn't talk about skirt length and elbows. Trust me. By Yaakov Avinu. HaRamban katav perush al sefer Yetzira, and the Ramban also wrote a perush on sefer Yetzira. Omnam, Sham mofia nusach bekutzar shel sefer Yetzira. So maybe this is the source. There is a shortened version in the Ramban of Sefer Yetzira. Mishum shezeh nusach sheya lifnei Ramban. Maybe on the one hand, this was the only available addition to the Ramban before his time. Mishum shechelek me pirusho avad. Or maybe it's only because part of his commentary was lost. Mishum shekatav perush rak al chelek mispar Sefer Yetzira al kol panim ktuvim sham darim kashim v'niskavim. So he tells us the Ramban wrote a very big, deep perush on Sefer Yetzira. Megamat sefer, the goal of this book, lelamdenu lahavin, she'af shal'af haribui sheyeshno ba'olam, that to teach us that in spite of the fact that there are many, many things that exist in this world, many what apparently are powers in this world, Hashem echad u'shmo echad. Only God is God and Hashem is one. V'lo ka'hashkafat avodah zarah, and unlike idolatry, yesh tofaot rabot v'sotorot ba'olam. There are many occurrences of things in this world and many contradictory things. Chomer v'ruach. You have something physical and something spiritual. Tov v'ra, or v'choshech, chesed v'din. These are opposites. Good and evil, light and dark. Chesed and din, which is acting charitable and acting on the strict letter of the law, which in modern terms we might say yin yang. He said the first thing you have to understand is that everything, and I mean literally everything, is from Hashem. Good, bad, light, dark, chesed, din. Kol nivachei hahistoria, kol hashigonot hameshugaim, kol yozmot hamelachim. Everything that's occurred in the course of history, all the craziness of the crazies, all the various things that the various kings may have tried to proffer in the world, remember we talked about before that there's a difference between that we have hashgacha pratit on each one of us, but when it comes to, we talked about this actually in Navi, sorry, but when it comes to the nation or to the world, Hashem moves things around and has things the way he wants them. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Ovdei avodah zarah ta'u v'to'im. Idol worshippers have made mistakes or have erred and are in error. Lichora b'tzedek. But it would seem maybe that their claim is almost, you can kind of say they're right. Sha'olam hu olam ribui. Yeshno sevel ba'olam. This world has tremendous amount of suffering. V'im lamrod zot anu rotzim lit'on sha'olam tov. And yet on the other hand, we say, wow, the world is so great. Yesh kan stira lichora. It seems to be that there's a contradiction. Ena oved avodah zara muchan letayech havana zo. The oved avodah zara is unable to whitewash this idea. V'chein yomar sheyesh Elokim letov. Slicha, yesh Elohim letov ve'Elohim l'ra. Actually, should say Elokim. There's a God of good and a God of evil. Shtei reshuyot. There's two authorities. We say Hashem is one. Omer Rabbi Avram ibn Ezra b'tchilat perusho leKohelet. So the Ibn Ezra says at the beginning of his commentary on Kohelet, shemin ha'echad tavona apulot hamitchalfot v'hamofet. Says that from one source, two opposite things can occur. I love this explanation. Listen to this. Hashemesh yalbin hakvisa. If you take something and leave it outside hanging in the sun, what happens to it? It can get white, like becomes white, right? It becomes faded. The colors may fade if it's too long in the sun. V'yashchir pnei hakoves. And at the same time, the person who's hanging the laundry out gets dark because the sun, the exact same sun, the way it reacts with the person's physical skin gets dark. V'imkein hashemesh malbin u'mashchir. What does the sun do? Does it make things white or does it make them dark? El hashemesh hu guf atzmai. The sun it's an independent body. Me'al l'shachrut u'me'al l'lavnut. It supersedes. That's not the right word. Whatever. You know what I mean? The idea of dark and white. El kafei pegishato im hamekabel tiyah ha'totzah. But based on the recipient, decides what the results are. Hachashmal misabev kor b'mekarer. What does electricity do? It makes cold air circulate in a refrigerator. Chom b'mecham. It also causes heat in a heater. Utnuan lemavrer. And it also causes a fan to move. V'lo nechne hachashmal cham o mistovev o kar. We don't call electricity hot, cold, mover. He says that the comparison is Hashem in this existence. Now let me translate into normal English this last bit he just talked about. He's trying to tell us what is the divergence between what we believe and what the idolatrous world would believe. We believe Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad. We believe in the idea of the unity of God. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. The people of Avodah Zarah say, look, there's two different things in this world. We see good and bad, light and dark, etc. So there must be multiple gods, a God of the good, a God of the light, a God of the dark. But at the same time, why do they see two different things? Because they assume each is independent. Evil is independent, good is independent, light is independent, dark is independent. But we don't see them as independent. We see them as all having one source. Everything that exists, from the expression is from, it's usually about food, but from the little flea to the horns of the greatest ram that's out there, and Hashem supplies the food for, but we believe from everything that exists, from the planets and the galaxies that are so far away we don't even have a concept other than mathematically that they exist, to this glass of water. Every single thing exists only because Hashem wants it to exist. It's the Ratzon Hashem. And therefore, what might seem like something that has power, the sun does have power, obviously. And again, this is a continuation we talked about earlier in this essay. The sun does have power. It has the power to give you a suntan, has the power to whiten your sheets outside. But the source of that power is Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. This is the jumping off point of Sefer Yetzira. By contrast, when we do Bezrat Hashem learn Tanya, and it just happens to be, quote, happens to be exactly the topic I'm working on right now in Tanya, chapter 23, having to do with this whole idea of Achdut Hashem. He has a separate treatise on Shar HaYichud, but within Tanya itself, he has the discussion over a period of 5 chapters of this idea of Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad based on Ein Od Milvado, that other than God there is nothing else, and what that actually means, and what is when we do mitzvot and how we contribute to that Ein Od Milvado. It's absolutely amazing. But the same topic, same idea, that number one, everything exists only because of God, and more importantly for our discussion here, that Hashem is the source of all these powers, And that was what Avram Avinu was trying to impress upon people that, in a sense, look, I understand what you're saying. I understand your ruchaniyut, your spirituality, that there must be some power to this big ball of fire in the sky and we should worship it. But understand that above that, there's something that's giving it the source, and that's what you should be worshiping. Let's go back into the text. Again, we're early in paragraph Kaf Hey 25, page 451. Umehem, and among those topics that this book, Sefer Yetzira, will discuss is Sifar, Sipur, Vasefer. Ritzono, Bisifar. What does it mean with the word Sifar? I'm going to read, let me read about 2 or 3 lines and I'll translate. Hashiur hapilus bagufim anivraim, the weights and measures of physical creation. Ki shiur ad sheyeh haguf mesudar va'aruch ra'ui lama shenivra lo. Lo yeh ki'im baminyan. When Hashem, actually, let me read, no, let me stop at that point. When Hashem wants a bird to fly, when it's in Hashem's ratzon that birds fly, Hashem has to give the birds certain physical qualities and the mental capacity to fly. When Hashem wants a pen to work, I want to do creations right now. When Hashem wants a human being to be able to walk, Hashem has to build into it a specific amount of blood vessels, certain amount of mass, of fat, of muscle. There has to be part. In other words, for those of you, I have my background for many, many, many years, I think 20 years, was in the business world, was in purchasing. And you talk about when you purchase something, you also have what's called a bill of materials. When you build something, if you've ever built an extension on your home, you've ever done a shipuz. So one of the things you do is you have what's called a bill of materials. A bill of materials is a list of everything you need. Now, just to say you need 5,000 screws isn't sufficient. You need 5,000 number 5 screws with the pitch of the thread to be such and such, because otherwise you're not going to know what screws you need. So it has to be very, very specific. So the first thing is mispar, number, that each thing in creation, for it to fulfill its destiny in this world, to fulfill its tafkid, its job in this world, Hashem has to give it a specific amount of items, its bill of materials, so to speak, that it has these to do it. So in other words, Hashem could not require, the Hashem's ratzon could not be of a bird that it should go into shul and be a chazan, because it doesn't have sound of power of speech, right? But humans, if we are not given the power of speech, Hashem's ratzon could not have been that he wants us to pray and use our voice. So they had to be given to us. So that's the word sefar, which again is the old Hebrew word for mispar, or number. There had to be a number. In this case, we're talking about midah mesura mishkan, not just the quantity, but the amount, not just the number that he's got. He's going to have 2 legs or 2 arms, but exactly how many veins are going to run through that body and how long they're going to be. I've always been fascinated by medicine, by surgery, and those certain facts that people generally don't want to know, but how long the human intestines really are when you really stretch them out there. They're not just a little bit. So all that, and not only that, and as he says, look at the next sentence, Hamidah v'hamusar ha'mesura v'hamishkal, ve'erech ha'tnuot, the value of every movement, v'sidur ha'musika hakol baminyan, v'etzoni lomar sefar. All this is sefar. All this adds up to this concept of number, is the amount, the quantity, the way it is going to be fashioned. Just like you see a builder, you don't see him build a house until first he has somehow in his mind designed it. Now, let's talk about this. Something we talked about a very long time ago, and it was probably in the first essay, was let's talk about humans for a minute. if I build a house, because we're going to go with that example because he uses it and Rav Aviner will use it. If I build a house, where does that start? Does it start with the blueprint? No. Does it start with me hiring the architect? No. Does it start with me raising money to hire the architect to write the blueprint? No. Now, obviously, I can go. Where does every single thing in the world start for human beings? Here, in the mind. It's a thought process. I decide I want to build a house. Now, what am I going to need? I have to express that to somebody if I can't do it myself. That person then has to translate those thoughts into action, making a list. And the list of building materials is such and such. And he has to requisition each thing. He has to order it. He has to pay for it. There's thousands of steps when you think about it, from the concept in a person's brain till the execution. Now, it's true on a micro level, not just macro. It's not true on a micro level. If I want to pick up this cup, there was a whole process that you didn't notice that took place in a millisecond. My brain said, I want the cup. It sends a message to my hand to grasp it in such a way that Hashem has created me and you, that we grasp something. That's why, by the way, we have fingerprints. It's not so you can identify someone at a crime scene. It's also, but we have that to give us the ability to grasp something. That's exactly one of the reasons why we're created such. And then to physically lift it, my brain also had to send that signal. But that all happened in a millisecond. So it looks like that the thought process and the actual bitzua, the actual execution of the thought, were almost simultaneous, but they weren't. Because if you took a CAT scan or whatever, the brain, and we're watching, you'd see certain synapses would fire. Again, you can't see synapses firing in a CAT scan. I'm making a little bit of this up. You'd see the synapses firing, sending the message to the hand then receives the message, and then so it is a process. It may seem instantaneous, but it's not. But obviously, if you build a house, from the moment the concept is in the brain to the time you have the house, there are literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of steps that have to take place. That's how a human being works. Hashem is exactly the opposite. What does that mean? This is not what he's talking about now, but it's going to lead us to understand what he's talking about now. Again, this is right from not just Tanya, but from many other Sefarim. You'll find this idea. By human beings, we have our brain, we have our thought, and we have an action. We have a ratzon, and we have an asiyah. And they're separate from each other. They're not the same. By Hashem, if Hashem is achad, ushmo achad, and this is a topic that will take us weeks and weeks and weeks to do eventually, down the road. But if Hashem is achad, ushmo achad, that means that there's nothing outside of God. That his thoughts and the bitzua, the actual execution, are simultaneous. There is no thought process leading to this, and to that. But by humans, we know that there is. So the way that the Sefer Yetzira is explaining to us how Hashem created the world is based on a mashal, how we would think. And that is, the first thing is sefer or mispar, that just like he says, just like a builder imagines a house and then says, okay, now I'll give you an example. When a person making a bill of materials, imagine you're the one who's going to build the house. And I say, okay, I know how to build your house. I'm going to give you a bill of materials of everything you're going to need. And you take a look at it, and among those things, you see cheese, you see plastic bottles, and you see a stroller. And that's how you're going to build your house. You're going to look and say, like, what? What are those doing in my bill of materials to build a house? Where's the wood? Where's the cement? Oh, here's the cement. Okay, here's the wood, but what is this stroller? What's this? Because you know intuitively that you need to put in this list exactly what you need. And you can't request that there be screws that are a quarter of a millimeter, it's way too small, that are they're half a centimeter long, when everything you need needs to be 1.5 centimeters long, because they're not going to do the job. So you will requisition exactly what you need for the function. Oh, but then the guy tries to sell you a bill of goods. He says, well, and we're also going to build on the side of your house, we're also going to build a little cage. And that cage is going to hold some dirt. What do I need that for? It's extraneous. What do I need that for? Again, you don't need extra. You need what you need. So now let's take a look. So this is his introduction to the first of the three things, Sfar, Sefer, and Sipur. This is the introduction of Sifar, or number. Let's take a look at Rav Aviner, please. So, 1 second. This out of the way. Okay. Sefer Yetzira hu Sefer Madai al Madai. The book of Sefer Yetzira, the book of creation, is both a scientific and above science. What's the word I'm looking for? Not above science. Okay, you know what I'm talking about. It's not just science, but it's something above that as well. Hamada mitapel b'havaya. Mada, science. Say it again. Transcends science. Very good. Thank you. One day I'll learn English. I keep saying that. I really should go to an ulpan for English. Hamada mitapel b'havaya. Science deals with the present, what we have. Minatcha, it dissects it. Velomedota, and learns it. With no connection to its source. Meaning, science deals with how. Science deals with what. Example, how does electricity work? It deals with what is the boiling point of water. Sefer Yetzira ba lilmod et havaya mitzad mekora achduti. Sefer Yetzira comes to help us learn about the existence of present from the perspective of the initial source, or what unifies everything together. By the way, which is kind of interesting, I just now realized it. If those of you are familiar with some of the theories Einstein had, one of his called the unification principle, I think it was called. So I never even thought about that. I have to read now what that is exactly. The beginning, the present, today, existence, is revealed through three things. Sefar, Sipur, v'Sefer. Klomar, meaning. Shalosh tochniot elokiyot, three divine plans. Adirot, besidur havaya kula, three divine, magnificent plans that are combined to bring order to the entire existence. Omnam, nachon sheyesh ba'olam ribuy hanireh ki'i seder v'tohu vavo. Yes, if you look at it, just from our regular perspective, plenty of things in this world look like tohu vavo, just complete and absolute balagan. For example, look at our government. Kaviyachol, abriya atzma'it. It kind of, as it were, it looks like creation is independent. Umenuteket me'kadosh baruch hu, and completely separated from God. Ach zot ta'ut. That's a mistake. Yesh tochnit elokit lahavaya. There is a godly, a divine plan for existence. V'tochnit zo po'elet b'shalosh ma'arachot. And this plan works in three different systems. First, we're going to talk is sefar. Sefar milashon sefarot, from the word sfarot, numbers. Tzurat hayachid hayom hi sifra ve'etzlan sefar. The word today is sifra, and back then was sefar. Hamispar govel umagdir b'meduyak. What does a number do? What does it do? What's a function of a number? Is to tell us and to limit something to a very specific amount. In other words, if I say to you, put a pinch of salt. Now, actually, there is an exact amount for that. Believe it or not, I actually looked into it. There is an amount when it comes to a pinch, but no one measures that. A pinch is a pinch of salt, right? Put a little bit of spices in. Put how much you want? I don't know, add a little bit more soup, whatever it might be. A number is specific. If I say to you, I want 3 eggs, I don't want 4. I don't want 2. I don't want 1 7/8. I want 3 eggs. Mikan gam hakinui biyamenu liyishuv sefer. Ma shebaratzon Hashem livro kavua. That which God wanted to create, or was in Hashem's desire to create, was kavua, was specific, was fixed, madud, measured, meduyak u'memuspar, specific and numbered, kiviyachol. Kol zot b'muvan eloki anisgav. This was all an understanding of the highly elevated divine will. Why do we have 7 billion plus people on Earth today? I remember when I was in, I used to still call it grammar school, but elementary school. I remember it was like 2 billion something people. Now it's over 7 billion. And I think by 2050, we're supposed to have 10 billion people on Earth. But why? It's a simple answer, mathematics, right? The more people, the more babies, and the more people live longer. Therefore, the less people die. So I can give you all the whys. I mean, right? I can tell you. But the ultimate reason is that the amount of people on Earth is exactly what Hashem wants right now. You know, it's a famous, I know some of you actually have this hanging in your homes. There's a famous statement from Kutzker Rebbe, I believe it is, that Hashem decided that it was time now, and at this point in history, for you to be born. You could have been born 1,000 years ago. You could have been born 1,000 years from now. But for some reason, you and your specific neshama, the combination of your neshamot right now, were necessary to be on Earth now. And that's a number, right? It's a number of, by the way, if you want to see something cool, just type in world population counter. You go into it and it shows you people, the amount it just flows, the people being born, people dying, and you see the net growth of Earth constantly. It's fascinating. I can actually sit there and watch it for a long time. Yeah, I have a very exciting life, I guess. So too in modern science. כדי לעשות סדר בכמויות, הידע, האדירות, שהולכות ומצטברות, המדע מבטא אותו במדידות ובמספרים. Modern science also makes use of numbers. How? למשל, בפסיכולוגיה, when it comes to psychology, Adam mavchin ben shnei gvanim. A person can make a distinction between two how do you say it in English? Help me out. Two varied things. Ach ben shnei gvanim domim yoter, shuv eino mavchin. But things that are not that distinguishable, let's say colors, for example, you get to a point where you really cannot distinguish them. And to measure those, you need something extremely accurate. Actually, let me give you an example of this. There's something called a caliper, which I actually know how to use because of being in purchasing and have been involved in the manufacturing outfit. A caliper measures the thickness of something and also the depths of something. So let's say you punch out on a piece of steel a small corner, and it's supposed to be 400ths of an inch deep. How do you measure that? You can't just go, well, that looks like it's 400ths of an inch deep. No, so you have a caliper. It goes into it, and you read the dial and tells you it's 400ths of an inch. But so we might be able to distinguish and say, okay, that looks like maybe it's a quarter of an inch, half an inch, a millimeter long. It's 2 centimeters. But when it gets down to it, it's a really small amount. You no longer can just exactly have chin and distinguish between what might be a quarter of a millimeter, what may be 3/8 of a millimeter. So you have to have something to measure it with. So too, with certain feelings a person might have, are measured relative to other people. And relative to a certain scale. Same thing is true when it comes to prices. You could say the price is too high, without setting its exact price. So, for example, if I say to you that this car is 30,000 shekel, you say, whoa, that's high. But what's that statement come from? Does that mean it's a lot of money? Or does that mean that the relative value of that car is much higher? But you still haven't stated, there's no specific statement that this car always costs X. So too, lahavdil, b'madrega elokit hanisgava kelifnei ribono shel olam, kishem sheyesh biyadenu misparim enoshiyim, just like we have physical human numbers, kach yesh biyadenu misparim elokiyim. We also have divine, godly numbers. Hashgacha v'hanaga elokit. Hashem's our divine watcher, and one who is the one steering the ship, so to speak. God doesn't say, he's using this expression, that approximately the person should have 2 eyes. Approximately, there should be 7 billion people on earth. There should be about 43 apples that grow this year in this tree. It is the most accurate thing in existence. Think about that, what he just said. It is mind-boggling. I had a conversation with a child, 11 years old. This goes back a number of years. He's already been through the army, I think, actually. And I said, there's 7 billion people on earth. We're talking and trying to get him to understand the grandiosity of God. There's 7 billion people on earth, and I'll make this up. That's exactly what I said to him. And every single decision the person makes, and every single thing that the person does, and every single thing the person thinks, and every single thing from the morning he wakes up to goes to sleep that courses through that person's body, Hashem is aware of it. He said, that's impossible. I said, right, of course it's impossible. It's impossible for you and me. It's only something godly. So that when I grow in our backyard, when we have pomelos growing on the tree, when we plant the tree, I might say, look, it might be cool to get 50 pomelos from it. Or they say at the Vilna Gaon, I don't know if it's true or not, that he could look at a tree and tell you how many leaves are on it just by looking at it. Yeah, that's like a brain I'll never understand. But the amount of leaves on that particular tree at that moment at time is exactly what Hashem wants on the tree. Now, yes, there are different schools of thought when it comes to Hashgacha Klalit in the world, that there are certain schools of thought that in certain areas, Hashem just says, let nature literally take its course. Leaves are going to fall, they're not going to fall. And on the other hand, you have, of course, the Gemara that tells us that a blade of grass doesn't grow until a little angel that Hashem sends says to grow. But whereas we think that we have the most accurate counting and numbering and measuring system, you go to the shuk, obviously, you go to the shuk, you say, shkoli, wait for me. And he throws the bag or she throws the bag on the scale. Okay, it's 2 kilo. Okay, the truth is, it may be 2 kilo. It may not be 2 kilo. But wait a minute, they have the government official that inspects the scale. Right, by law you have to, by halacha you have to. 2 kilos, 2 kilo. The only one that really knows that it's exactly 2 kilos Hashem. According to the Gemara, there's a discussion. There are 3 opinions of the length of Ben Hashmashot. From the time the sun sets until the stars come out, it's called Ben Hashmashot, what we call it in English twilight. How long does that time last? There are 3 opinions, or 4. The last one is Keheref Ayin, a blink of an eye, and only Hashem knows exactly when that is. How do we know that we can't know exactly? Because when Moshe Rabbeinu was told by Hashem, go to Paro and say that I'm going to be killing the firstborn Bachatzot HaLaila at midnight, Moshe says Kachatzot HaLaila, approximately midnight. Hashem says Bachatzot at midnight. Moshe says Kachatzot, because only Hashem knows when exactly midnight is. Well, wait, I can look at my watch. Okay, I know midnight is at such and such a time. It's all approximate. The most meduyak in the world is what Hashem has created, meaning everything that exists. Okay, actually, I'm going to stop here because I'm just going to mention what this is, and then we're going to talk about it next week, Bezrat Hashem. In the Arab world, there's that which is known as the Kalam. I wrote down a note here. It is the area of thought, of theological belief in Islam that seeks the Shemavakesh Latzrich Datam v'lishlo deot menugadot. It seeks to justify their religion and to lishlol, to negate every other religion. It's a particular school of thought within Islam called Kalm. Kaf Lamed or Kaf Aleph. I forgot already. What does it say? Kaf, where is it? Kaf Lamed Aleph Men. It's not Kilaim, which kind of is funny because Kilaim means destroy them in Hebrew. It's Kalam or Kalam. We're going to discuss this next time. I'm going to pick it up right here. Bezrat Hashem. Matter of fact, let me make a little mark here after we're done. Now, all we've talked about today is sefer, the first of those 3 things. We're going to learn next week, Bezrat Hashem, at least 1, if not 2, the next 2. And at that point, we're going to see where we go with it, because all we're doing right now is laying a foundation. But how or with what tools, so to speak, God created the universe, that Hashem is the source of all that exists and all the powers that exist, and I'll go one step further, which he didn't discuss now, but will. That is that, what does it mean when we say in the morning, HaMachadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid, that Hashem renews every day? We perceive that God created the world, sefer Parshat Bereshit, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v't'aretz v'aretz da-da-da-da, v'hi or, yikavu hamayim, all that. B'asara ma'amarot nivra olam. The world was created with 10 utterances. Boom. Sof pasuk, done. Now we have a world. But that is not true. What does it mean, first of all, the 10 utterances? It's its own discussion. But if Hashem created the world with these 10 utterances, and it is unnatural to have yesh me'ayin, meaning something out of nothing, what keeps it going? Why did the water of the Yam Suf, after it split, come back together? Because water naturally, the way Hashem created it, wants to be together, not to split apart. Naturally, nothing exists from nothing. You have to, it's a law of science that Hashem also created. You can't create matter from nothing. Matter is created with other matter. So how do we stay in existence? Well, we exist. Yeah, but how? Why? Because Hashem wills it. And HaMachadesh b'chol yom b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid. In His goodness, Hashem reawakens and re-gives birth, so to speak, to the universe every single day. Without that, we wouldn't exist. Okay, I think we've done enough deep stuff right now. Bezrat Hashem, I know it's Hanukkah next week, but like I told you, every year, if we don't learn during Hanukkah, the Greeks won because they wanted to stop learning Torah. I don't want them to win. So whoever's here, even if it's just one person, we have class next week, 10:15, Bezrat Hashem, Wednesday morning. All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Bye-bye.